All right, man, peace. So, once again, I was checking my DVR. I saw a nice little documentary on a former sports prognosticator, professional gambler from the 1970s, early 1980s, named Jimmy the Greek. He was very famous for picking games. He was one of those guys who was on some of the Forerunner sports NFL shows back in the 70s, back when the NFL was coming up. He made a name for himself by picking games. He had a lot of connections, both in Vegas and in the sports world. Well, he fell. His fall from grace came due to a moment of honesty. All right. What he did was he engaged in a lot of backroom conversation, but he did it in the front room. All right. He was too honest. He made statements that a lot of higher level decision making Caucasian men normally make behind closed doors. All right. He said things that he wasn't supposed to say, and they took him down because of it. And now we're going to check out this feature, and they're going to show you how Jimmy got himself in trouble.
He was getting more and more difficult to handle. Jimmy always had to have the biggest suite, the longest limo, the biggest expense account. And Jimmy was just getting to be from high maintenance to very high maintenance.
Jimmy was a loner. He was narcissistic, cantankerous. He was a little off the top of his game, not as well connected as he once was.
Jimmy on occasion said, "Gee, boss, I really having trouble keeping up. I just, I don't feel good. I had diabetes. I had high blood pressure." And frankly, Jimmy's contacts at the NFL were getting as old as Jimmy.
It isn't hard to imagine that Jimmy would say, "Do I want to make 40 phone calls, or do I want to go to the track?"
Now you see how they're kind of dogging him out. This is what they do when they don't need you anymore, when they don't want you anymore. When you say something, when you make a mistake that they can use against you to take you down when they wanted to take you down for a long time. All right. So Jimmy the Greek, I see a lot of times when you're in these type of environments, whether it's the entertainment industry or the corporate world, when you're a commodity, an asset, you're bringing a lot to the table, people will tolerate your bullshit. But when you're no longer bringing to the table what you need to bring, and you're still bringing a lot of bullshit, all the stuff that they never liked is going to come to the forefront when the time is right. And this is what happened to this man. But the coup de grace is when he said some things that he wasn't supposed to say. He said some things that the so-called black man was not supposed to hear from the so-called white man.
He would get his driver and go to the track.
He was also very, very upset what he thought was his lack of airtime. How much am I getting today? Only 245. I got so much more to say. And then when we'd say to him, okay, well, tell us what else you have, what he had wasn't good enough to warrant the extra time.
We were beginning to perceive the end of the road for Jimmy.
The black is the better athlete, and he's bred to be the better athlete because this goes back all the way to the Civil War, when during the slave trading, the slave owner would breed his big black to his big woman, so that he could have a big black kid. See?
And I got a phone.
Now you heard what he's saying right there. He said that now he's going in. Now this interview took place on Martin Luther King Day of, I believe, 1981 or 1982. And the first thing on his mind was trying to break down why the so-called black man was a superior athlete. Now, I made a video a while ago when LeVar Ball stated that the reason why UCLA lost in the tournament, in the NCAA tournament, was because they had too many Caucasians on the team. In other words, they didn't have enough team speed. A lot of liberal blacks and liberal whites got mad at the video. They came in the comments. They start ranting and raving about how Duke won the national championship 7 years ago, and they tried to name teams about that had 3 white starters, and they won this and they won that. And I responded back the same way I respond now. The so-called black man represents approximately 6 to 8% of the U.S. male population, according to the official U.S. statistics. He represents 6%, but he represents 75% in the NFL, 75% in the NBA. And this is with a purposeful attempt, particularly by the NBA, to recruit players from Europe and overseas. Who's being racist? Is it the people stating the facts, or is it the recruiters, the coaches, the scouts, the general managers who are proactively targeting so-called black men? Are they doing it to fill demographics? Is this race-based or quota-based hiring practices at work? Or is it because they know that the so-called black male is a superior athlete? Just asking a question. Jimmy the Greek is making a certain statement. Now, what the Caucasian man does, and he'll often do this as well when he's speaking about the so-called light-skinned black, he'll state that the so-called light-skinned black comes from Caucasian males, so-called slave owners, sleeping with black women. That is what he teaches that the light-skinned black came from, right? In the same way, he teaches that the great black athlete came from him mating large black men with large so-called black women. In other words, he wants to cast himself as the engineer, as the brain trust, right? The brainchild behind any form of black success or black authority or so-called black magnificence. The reason why you're great at sports is because of me. The reason why you're educated is because of me. This is an attempt at psychological mind control. All right. Jimmy the Greek is not a historian. So why did he make that statement? He made that statement because that's what he's heard behind closed doors from other affluent Caucasians. That's what he heard in his household growing up. This is the justification that the Caucasian will use whenever a so-called black man is better than him at something. Right? It's the reason why the so-called Caucasian makes television shows and writes books stating that the pyramids were built by aliens. Because in other words, he's saying, I don't know how they were built, so they must have been built by an extraterrestrial race, because there's no way that a dark-skinned nation of people could have built the pyramids, and I don't know how they were built. All right? That's why he says that. That's why he says Stonehenge must have been built by aliens. Right? Every megalithic structure must have been built by aliens. That's the mentality behind those statements, behind that justification. All right, I'm going to rewind back his statement so that we can hear him again.
A phone call from...
This goes back up
Road for Jimmy.
the black is the better athlete. And
he just said it matter-of-factly. He said the black is the better athlete. He said that. All right? This is known in sports scouting circles. All right? This has been known since the 40s. This is why they had to find a way to graft the so-called black athlete back into the sports world. You must understand something, and I've stated this already in previous videos. The so-called black man was in Major League Baseball in the late 1800s. He was a jockey. He was in horse racing in the late 1800s. All your best jockeys were black, so-called black men in the late 1800s. They were pushed out of the sports world when the Caucasian started to fully develop his society in the late 1800s, because he understood that athletes are set up as a paragon of success, of dominance. They're a manifestation of male energy. That's why I stated that the UFC was created as a method, as an outlet for white male masculinity. Now, somebody made a comment in that video. I think it was the Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor video. He made a statement. He said, well, then what was hockey created for? Please understand something. Hockey was created, at least the American version, predominantly refined anyway by the black Nova Scotians. All right. And I'll probably do a video about them. Those were indigenous so-called black people to the northeastern part of Canada. They actually had their own league. All right. Believe it or not, the so-called black man actually had his own hockey league in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They invented things like the slap shot. A lot of the famous maneuvers used in hockey were invented by the so-called black man. All right. Hockey came from Europe. It was invented by the so-called black Europeans. All right. The Dutch, and a lot of the people from the British Isles who came here, and they were so-called black people, believe it or not. All right, but that's neither here nor there. But this man got in trouble for making statements, quote unquote, racially inflammatory, i.e. honest statements that he wasn't supposed to make on television.
And he's bred to be the better athlete because this goes back all the way to the Civil War, when during the slave trading, the slave owner would.
See, he don't know. And he know he was starting to fuck up too. That's why he started stuttering. First off, there wasn't any slave trade during the Civil War. He's not a historian. But what he's doing is he's regurgitating what he's heard. And he's regurgitating his own justification for why the so-called black male is the best. Right? You're the best because I basically bred you that way, like a dog, like how you breed a dog or a horse to be successful. All right? The so-called Caucasian must always cast himself in a position of power as the engineer.
Would breed his big black to his big woman so that he could.
And that doesn't even make any sense. Why would you, as a Caucasian, if you're a slave owner, why would you make a practice of breeding large, strong black males with large, strong black females? You're basically breeding them to eventually take you down. Why would you do that? That makes no sense.
He could have a big black kid, see?
How strong do you have to be to plow the fields? Give me a break.
See?
And I got a phone call from Jimmy's producer.
They just don't like to admit that just naturally there are advantages that the so-called black male has physically. Now, I saw in the comments in another video, must have been a Caucasian man who said, well, yes, but this is the reason why Caucasians have created all these inventions. That's the video for another day, but the Caucasian is not superior mentally to the so-called black man. All right? The Caucasian is not superior mentally to any nation. As a matter of fact, and you know what? I'll go into this deeper in other videos in regards to the mental aspect and mental capacity, the cerebral capacity of the so-called black male and so-called black female. That's predicated directly based on testosterone. As anybody out there knows, the so-called black man and black woman have the highest levels of testosterone of any nation or any race of people on the planet Earth. There have been studies that directly link the development of the cerebral cortex to testosterone. The proof of that is that when females have the sex change or the gender reassignment surgery from female to male, and they're injected with additional testosterone, their cerebral cortex grows according to the amount of testosterone that they're injected with. So there is a correlation to the size and the development of the cerebral cortex with the amount of testosterone in the brain. All right. There's actually a South African scientist, I can't remember his name, I'll probably include him when I do the video, who stated explicitly that the so-called blacks of the Western Hemisphere, meaning the blacks of the captivity, have the most highly developed brains of any nation of people on the planet Earth. That's according to him and his studies on cranial development. But that's neither here nor there. I'll touch on that later.
Producer who said, I think we got a problem.
In Washington today, the local NBC television station interviewed people about the state of race relations on this Martin Luther King's birthday.
Jimmy the Greek Snyder is in hot water tonight over some remarks he made today about black athletes.
Well, they've got everything. If they take over coaching like everybody wants them to, there's not going to be anything left for the white people.
Now, you heard what he said there? See, what he was doing was he was speaking the mind of the higher level Caucasian decision makers. All right. This is why I've stated in the past, you brothers have to move past this mindset of so-called white supremacy. They make the decisions that they make based off of self-preservation. All right. That's what's called having a ruling class mentality. Now, you so-called black men, a lot of you, not all you brothers, but a lot of y'all do not have a ruling class mentality. So you call it white supremacy. It's not white supremacy. It is what's known as trying to preserve your own nation of people. The Caucasian man knows if he does not preserve his own nation of people by trying to hold off and hold down and oppress the other nations of people, particularly the so-called black man, he will lose his power because he knows his own real history. All right. Like I've stated already, their own real history is that they've been slaves for the vast majority of their existence. That's where the term slave comes from, the term Slav. All right. When you look at the Caucasian, where did they come from? Yugoslavia, right? Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, right? The Russian steppe. Those are the Slavic peoples. Those are the people who were in slavery under the Byzantine Empire, which were so-called black people ruling over them, right, for over 1,000 years until they were taken down by the Ottoman Turks, who were Caucasian Muslims. All right, so they know their history. It's genetically encoded in them to understand that the so-called black man was their overlord during the medieval time period, really all the way up almost to the 1700s. All right, Benjamin Franklin knew about it. I'm going to do a video on him soon, proving that. But they know about it. And this is why this man got in trouble. He was speaking a sober mind. He was saying things that were not supposed to be said on TV. All right. He was speaking according to the paranoid mind of the Caucasian decision makers. Right. The fear of the so-called black rulership coming back on them. All right. These things that they deal with in their nightmares. It is what it is.
I mean, all the players.
When we're in the room and after we watch the...
I'm going to rewind his statement again.
In hot water tonight over some remarks he made today about black athletes.
Well, they've got everything. If they take over coaching, like...
He said they got everything. What was he talking about? They've got everything. He said if they take over coaching, remember, coaching is just coaching is just a metaphor to lead. That's why I made a video. Do black players respect black coaches? Because they, a lot of the feminist provisions that have been made, led by the elite liberal Caucasians, were purposefully made so that the so-called black man could stay in a disenfranchised position and create the dynamic of the black male against the so-called black female. That's why I tell you, brothers, don't argue with the so-called black woman. She's here to be a distraction. All right? Most of them don't even know what the hell's going on. They're here to be a distraction. Don't argue with them. There's bigger fish to fry. All right? There's bigger fish to fry. The so-called black, this is why I told you brothers before, watch that movie Total Recall, the old one with Arnold Schwarzenegger. All right, his wife is played by Sharon Stone. Her job is to watch him and make sure that he stays in line. All right, make sure that he doesn't come out of line. She's there to watch him. All right, that's the job of many of these so-called black women. That's why as soon as you start to come out and you start to be a liberated three-dimensional thinker, they try to pull you back. A lot of these so-called pro-black women, they're also pro-homosexual. A lot of them are pro-lesbian. A lot of them are pro-transgender. All right? They're with the so-called liberal socialist ideology and agenda. It is what it is. All right? But this man is showing the paranoid mind of the so-called elite Caucasian, the so-called decision-making Caucasian. That's why they made him pay.
Like everybody wants him to, there's not going to be anything left for the white people.
You see that? There's not going to be anything left for the so-called Caucasian. That is their fear. I told you that. They are trying to preserve their rule. All right? So you see, and that's another thing. You see a lot of times the Caucasian will come on and they'll try to make it a everybody against the Caucasian Jew type thing. The Caucasian Jew is at the very, very top. All right? They're the chief of the Caucasian tribes, but they are Caucasian. The regular Caucasians try to act like they're separate. No, they're just jealous. All right? The Caucasian Jews, they come from caves just like the other Caucasians come from. They all come from that environment. All right? In the Bible, they're known as Amalek, meaning the so-called Caucasian Jews. They were known as Amalek. All right? And they converted to so-called Judaism in the 8th century AD, 740 AD to be correct. They were known as Khazars or Khazars. That's a Hebrew word meaning swine. All right? They were called swine or pigs. All right? Because that's what they looked like. That's what their habits were. You can read a book called The 13th Tribe by Arthur Koestler. He was later on, he was a so-called Jew himself. He called the book The 13th Tribe because he was basically saying if the Caucasian Jew is a real Jew of the Bible, then they must be a 13th tribe because there were only 12. In other words, they're not the real Jews of the Bible. That was his statement. All right? Those were his statements. He was later killed for those words by the Israeli Mossad. He was found swinging from his, I think it was his chandelier or was it his ceiling fan? Can't remember which one. But it is what it is.
I mean, all the players.
When we're in the room and after we watched the clip, Jimmy could sense impending doom. Jimmy knew this wasn't going well. He was trying to argue his point that it wasn't so bad and he didn't really mean anything racial.
That's because
He didn't. In his mind, he didn't mean anything racial. He was just telling the truth. All right? That's how he really felt. It wasn't like he was saying, let's kill all these niggers. All right? He was basically saying, look, they're more talented than us. If we give them an even chance, they're going to outdo us. That's what he was saying.
they practice and they play.
But nobody in that room said,
You see what he said? They practice and they play and they practice and play and they're better than us and they're bigger than us and they're stronger than us and our women want them. We're going to lose everything. God damn it.
well, Jimmy, we agree with you. It really didn't sound racial. It sounded incredibly inappropriate. I think on Martin Luther King Day, doubly inappropriate.
Yeah, you were upset because he said something that he wasn't supposed to say on a day that he wasn't supposed to say it. Because once again, please understand, Martin Luther King was set up to be a distraction for so-called blacks. He was set up to promote the socialist agenda, him in concert with Lyndon Baines Johnson. All right. Once he was no longer used, they set him up with that CIA operative, Jesse Jackson. All right. And his handler, Leon Rose. But that's another story for another day.
He turned to me and in Greek said, "Tiboris nakanisi amena. What can you do for me? Save me." And I said, I said, there's nothing I can do at the moment.
No, that's not what that means. Means that's your ass. All right. That's Greek for I didn't tell you to say that shit. That's what that means in Greek.
The next day, I walked in with a copy of the New York Daily News. The screaming tabloid headline was, "Greek blasts blacks." And I said, oh, God.
All we saw were these headlines, front page stories around the country, and they were all negative. There weren't loud and angry comments from black leaders. CBS was not prepared to get into a public debate on these issues. And unfortunately, Jimmy got thrown under the bus.
Yeah, because they were in the process of socially engineering society. Right? And once again, you cannot have a prominent Caucasian man say some shit like that. All right? When you have high-level politicians or corporate leaders that get caught on camera or on audio making statements like that about so-called blacks, they have to be removed because they have to make him look like an anomaly. They cannot make him look like he's just one of the guys. All right? These people, they rule through subterfuge. That's how they rule. That's why I stated initially, the so-called Caucasian would like you to think that he's ruling because he's superior mentally. That's not how they rule. All right? They rule through deception. All right? They get other nations caught up in their money system. Right? They rule because they have a greater military. These are the type of things that they do. And then they put up what's known as proxy leaders, meaning leaders of other countries that you think are there for the benefit of their people, but they're really there to serve the banking interests of the international bankers. All right? That's how it is set up.
CBS put out a press release calling my remarks reprehensible. I begged them not to use that word. Call it a mistake, I said. Call it stupid, dumb, anything but that word. I got nowhere.
Yeah, because they were done with you, dude. If you were still an asset, then they would have said he made a mistake. We're going to suspend him for 30 days, and that would have been that. All right, you pissed off the wrong person, so they said this is our chance to get rid of this dude.
They completely screwed me over.
And plus, you were not a Caucasian Jew, you were Greek. All right? And this is another thing a lot of you brothers have to understand. And this is why I made the statement that I made about the Caucasian Jew being on the top of the totem pole amongst the Caucasians. They have a hierarchy. All right? There's the Caucasian Jew. And then you have the blonde hair, blue-eyed, what they call the Nordic type or the Germanic type. Right, from northern Germany, Scandinavia, and parts of the British Isles. Then you have what they call the darker whites, all right, from Greece, which is where Jimmy the Greek was from, Italy, Serbia, Spain, Portugal. they don't consider these people. I mean, they're still viewed as being above people of other so-called nationalities or origins, but they're not viewed on the same level as a Caucasian Jew or a Nordic type Caucasian. All right, so they'll throw them out with no problem. All right, Jimmy the Greek is what they call a dark white. All right, and like I've stated previously, Greece was originally a land that was inhabited by so-called blacks before Alexander the Macedonian came down and conquered and changed the physical characteristics of that region. All right, but that's another video for another day.
I had to call Jimmy and tell him that we were taking him off the air. And Jimmy, you could hardly hear his voice. He said, "Gee, boss, I'm really sorry for what happened here. I never intended this to happen. I feel real bad about it. I wish there was something I could. Won't you let me go on the air to apologize?" I said, "No, Jimmy."
I think that we were very, very sensitized. I mean, 9 months before Al Campanis had issued a statement on Nightline saying that the blacks were not qualified to manage in baseball.
Now, Al Campanis, it's funny they mentioned him. That's the same guy who was telling, what's his name, Glenn Burke, the homosexual baseball player, that if he got married, he'd pay for his honeymoon. All right, because he wanted to maintain that facade and that he was heterosexual in that Luciferian LA Dodger locker room.
Listen, this is trouble. Networks don't like controversy. Particularly, they don't like this kind of controversy that involves race. In a crass business sense, it was an easy call.
Networks love controversy involving race. It's just that they want to be the ones controlling it, and they want to make racial statements subconsciously, subliminally. All right, that's how that. Like I said, the elite Caucasians, they work through deception, double talk, double speech, innuendo. When you have a guy like him, Jimmy the Greek, who speaks so blatantly like that, it leaves no room for deniability. All right. The elite level Caucasians who are trained to speak in a certain way, a certain psychological, manipulative way, they like to be able to make statements to influence your mind and also have deniability. Like, what are you talking about? Why would you make those statements? I don't feel that way. Right? You couldn't deny anything that Jimmy the Greek has said because he was out front with it. He was blatant with it. So he had to go. Plus, like I said, he was a dark white. There's no protection for him. He's from Greece. They say he can go.
You know, on Friday afternoon here in Washington, our former colleague Jimmy the Greek made some regrettable and offensive remarks for which he has apologized. Yesterday, CBS issued a statement disassociating itself from those remarks. It goes without saying that his comments do not reflect in any way the thinking or attitudes of the rest of us here at CBS Sports.
Yes, they do. Especially you. All right. Y'all all feel the same way that he feels. You got to cover your tracks. Most of these top level broadcasters and newscasters, they're low level affiliates of groups like the Council of Foreign Relations and, Trilateral Commission. Their job is to make sure that everything stays under wraps. All right. That's their job.
While we deplore the incident this weekend, we are saddened that our 12-year association with Jimmy had to end this way.
Jimmy was always insecure about his education and always tried to sound more educated than he really was on issues that he knew nothing about.
In certain sports, you have more prominent.
What, swimming? Is that guy?
I think he wandered into an area where he didn't have any expertise.
I agree with that. He didn't know what the hell he was talking about because there was no slave trade in 1865. And they damn sure wasn't breeding so-called black people to be super strong. That didn't even make any sense. But like I said, that is an old wives' tale that's told and retold by Caucasians to make themselves feel like they're the reason why blacks are successful in athletics.
The black is a better athlete to begin with.
I agree with that.
Because he's been bred to be that way.
That's some bullshit.
Because of his high thighs and big.
I think he did.
He said because of his high thighs and big thighs. He's about to go to the penis area too, but he had to cut himself short.
He didn't have either the vocabulary.
He said they can jump higher.
Or the knowledge to go further with it?
I don't think the network was left with any choice in the matter. I don't think the network fired him. I think he fired himself.
This was a...
Sometimes people do fire themselves, but also keep in mind, Brent Musburger and his brother were involved in a barroom brawl with Jimmy the Greek a couple of years before this issue came to the forefront.
There was a time when the black athlete was really becoming dominant, and so whites were very sensitive. You know, our games are being taken away from us.
You heard what he said? He basically said the same shit that Jimmy the Greek said. So this is why I said they really mad at him, because he says something at a time period where, like this other Caucasian man said, white people were very sensitive about it. They were sensitive. This is why I said what I said in another video. All right. The UFC was created to be a way for the Caucasian man to manifest and show his masculinity. It was a way for him to create sports heroes for his sons to look up to. All right. They were tired of taking their sons to stadiums and ballparks and always it being a man of color there. All right. That's all it was for.
I don't want this on. There isn't much left for the white guys.
And there was just...
You heard what he said? There's much left for the white guys. He must have had a few drinks because he was going in. God damn. My man must have had some off the rocks because he was going in.
There was a certain sensitivity on the part of blacks because the implication...
Motherfucker probably said, and another thing, a black man stole my wife.
...was, sure, they can play games, but they can't do anything else.
That's what I was touching on earlier. All right. A lot of times the Caucasian will acknowledge that the so-called black man is superior physically, but then they'll try to take it to a mental level. Like I said, I'm going to do a video very soon on the so-called black brain and what the validity is to those statements.
I knew Jimmy well enough to know that the image he'd been painted with as being a racist is just not true.
Well, of course you're going to say that. I mean, you were one of the first black men on national TV. I mean, no disrespect, brother, but you're probably, let's be for real. I mean, how did you get that job? Did you really just get that job because you were the best person for TV? I mean, so-called black men now got to bend over to get on these a lot of these shows and be members of certain fraternal organizations. No disrespect.
Mr. Snyder, were your remarks misinterpreted, sir? Yeah, that might.
Oh, they got him sitting down with Jesse Jackson, the black CIA MK handler.
No, we said there are no questions.
How often do you see people make a misstatement and then later spend the rest of their lives apologizing for it? In this case, the whole country saw it.
I was telling them how superior the black athlete...
Jimmy? They didn't want you talking that shit, man. I know what you were trying to say. You were being honest. But you had a couple drinks and you went a little too damn far, man. You started talking about the black man's thighs and his high ass. I don't know where you went next with it. I'm glad they cut the video off.
And for the reasons that the black tries harder.
It was a process by which he got his heart broken, his career taken away, his whole self-image diminished. It was like watching a free-spirited bronco getting broken in like an old western.
He has made a big mistake, but then all of us do. And we have to, at some point in time, when people show it comes right hard, to forgive, to redeem, and to move on.
Come on, Jesse. You know you want to make up a word like you love to do. He made a mistake, and he had to jog a ties. Come on, man. I wonder how much money did Jimmy the Greek pay Jesse Jackson to vouch for him on national TV? Because we know Jesse about the money, the Rainbow Push coalition, and that sounds suspect. That sounds suspect. Rainbow Push.
When I told him that we were terminating him, he said, "Boss," he said, "you're killing me." He said, "I'll never get another job in television again." And he didn't.
And, that's pretty much it for this video. he wasn't supposed to, because he said something that he wasn't supposed to say in a way that he wasn't supposed to say it. But I just wanted to play this video just to show you guys this is how they really think, and that's how they really speak in the back rooms. But he got in trouble for saying it in the front room. All right. And this is even more reason why so-called black people should not be worried about. They shouldn't be concerned about getting the favor of the Caucasian man or any other nation of people. All right. You're supposed to be self-defined to the best of your ability. But anyway, peace.